PM, folks. Boa noite. So, welcome to this panel on the future of on-chain games. I've been asked 45 seconds ago to moderate it, so I'll try to do my best. I think we'll start with a little round of introduction. Go for it.
Hello. Great. Hello, everyone. I am Guilty Gyoza. I do experiments on StarkNet, and I run topology.
Hey everyone, my name is Gabe. I lead product and operations on the Cartridge team. We're building the StarkNet gaming platform, supporting all these teams, launching games on StarkNet.
Hello, I'm Thomas, and I'm developing Age of Akar on StarkNet.
GM, I'm Loaf from Bibliotheca DAO, and I'm building Realms ecosystem on StarkNet.
And I'm Self from Brick, founder of Brick. So, let's start off with a question. So, 3 of you and nearly 4 of you were in the Hacker building for the whole week. So, what insight do you have about games after spending so much time together?
Okay. Well, so now I've been working on a project that uses game channels, and basically it allows you to have a game that is in real time and where you don't need to pay fees. And honestly, I might be a little bit biased because I worked on the project, but I really think that this could allow new kind of games like this. Okay.
A bit closer to you.
Like this?
Yeah, like that.
Okay. This could allow new kind of games that you've never seen before on-chain to be working. So, yeah.
Yeah, remember we talked about Loaf, about doing something a little bit similar. So the idea is that you don't have to run the entire thing on chain, but have it so that you can verify it on chain at any point in time. So you still have security, but you're not paying for it. It's more in case you want to do it.
Yeah, it's genius. Well done. I think yeah, we would have emerged sooner or later, and you got it done in 48 hours. It's crazy. We decided to build a non-ZK fog of war system using well, it was a centralized node, but in the future it'll be a decentralized node, and basically it allows games to reveal some information to players after they meet some certain parameters. So it's exciting, and we're going to build that into Realms.
Learnings from the Hacker House. I mean, I'll just go and throw in Cartridge as like a representative of the gaming community, high level. Everyone in the house was so great. Like, it's really welcoming community, and the energy and like the enthusiasm for the StarkNet gaming community. I felt it tangibly for the first time. I mean, I've communicated with all 3 of these guys on Discord for the last 6 months, and I'm now meeting you guys in person, and the same is true for a lot of the other members of the community. So it was really cool to be here. It's a lot of fun.
Gyoza, what did you think about the Hacker House?
A bit non-applicable, right? I wasn't there. But when I visited, I saw a lot of cigarette butts and beer bottles. So I think you're having a lot of fun time. But I heard about bedbugs, so that's probably the low point.
It's called a bed feature. It's a very different thing.
So, yeah, catching bedbugs and catching the software bugs.
It's been a good time.
All right,
the Frenchies had a very good time.
Okay, so next question from me would be, what is now the next thing that you think is on the on-chain game ecosystem's roadmap? Like, what's the next thing we're going to be working on? What's the next thing that's going to be like all the rage and everyone's going to talk about?
Well, I think the thing that is holding up the game... Sorry? It's working? Okay. Like this? Okay. What I think is that we should improve user experience. I think this is the best thing we need to work on. So first, the fact that you need to pay, it sucks. And also the fact that it is incredibly slow. And we are not going to fix this by just making the block bigger and faster. It is, you need to think about it.
Is it working?
Yeah, I'll work it.
Here, it's working? Okay.
Sorry. What was I saying?
You were saying that UX is an issue, specifically
yeah.
about paying gas, and it's just super slow.
Yeah, I think we need to think about different ways to do it. And channels is a way to do it. So a little bit like Lightning Networks, they did not make Beacon faster by just increasing the amount of blocks. Instead, what they did is they moved everything off-chain and they just kept the committing things and the security. I think this is what we should do with games, but maybe there are different ways to achieve this.
I think if anyone's seen what OPCraft has done, I think those guys are really leading the charge in kind of, I guess, on-chain game design, and that really involves running running a VM in the browser, so you can optimistically update the game state, so the user doesn't really experience any lag at all. This is actually, most games actually do this anyway, like traditional games. So I think that's the big unlock. That's everyone's going to be talking about in about 6 months. But we're not quite there yet with the Cairo Rust VM. So yeah. But until then, I think I think state channels are. We're going to see a lot more of that. But they also come with their own kind of challenges. You know, more than 1v1 type channels. Difficult to do. So, yeah.
I think especially as we get closer to, playing games on mainnet, I think that we have to make a leap from the theory of Web3 gaming and the idea that it's going to be cool to it really being cool. And really what that means is focusing on player experience. Not to turn it into like a pitch for Cartridge, but one of the things that we're working on that our co-founder Terrence has been spending a lot of time in is implementing WebAuthn for controller creation.
So can we quickly talk about, like, 20 seconds, what's WebAuthn?
You'll have to hit up Terrence for like the technical details here. But WebAuthn, practically speaking for a user, means that in order to play a game, which largely the case today is, to onboard to a game and start playing, you're connecting your existing wallet. And the wallets are all great, but it's not a pattern that users are used to when they're playing Web 2 games currently today. You're dealing with browser plugins, and as a Web 2 player, it's a totally unfamiliar thing. You might be managing multiple wallets, having to do token swaps. I mean, it is somebody who's not in the Web3 space already. It's largely unfamiliar. So WebAuthn gives players the opportunity to easily create a cartridge controller and quickly onboard and start playing games. And WebAuthn enables you to skip the whole like seed phrase process, create a username, and use Face ID or a fingerprint to create your controller. So no password management, no seed phrase management. I think it's one example of making the experience of playing Web3 games actually great, the way that Web 2 games are today.
The way I like to think about it is we're thinking about wallets the wrong way. We always start with the wallet, it's like, oh, download this thing, download this thing. But the way users approach is like, I want to use this thing. I don't care about the wallets. So that's definitely something that WebAuthn helps with. It's more, you want to play this game? No worries. I'll help you play the game. It just so happens that I've created a wallet for you. And now you have a wallet that you can carry on with you to the other applications. And I think that's really how you start onboarding a lot of people. People don't care about having a wallet. They care about the application. You don't care about having a Google account. You want to have Gmail, Google Sheet, Google Doc. It's the same thing, I think.
Great. So there's a quick story. I was talking to a ex-game programmer who's now working at Google, and we very quickly reached the consensus that on-chain game is not a thing. Like, Web3 game is not a thing yet, because game programmers think about affordances, right? A medium on which you create an interactive media, which is a game, and you think about the affordances of that media and use that to make games. For example, Candy Crush or Angry Birds, it sort of builds around the the centrality of touchscreen and the UI that's enabled by touchscreen, and you use that as affordance and you design game mechanics, right? So that competitive first-person shooter games doesn't really translate well to touchscreen because it's going against of the affordance, small screen with touch interface. So the question really is, what is the affordance of blockchain execution environment? What makes it different from just running games on centralized server that scale much better as you put more capital in? I think it's a really hard question. I think we all believe in some affordances. Maybe we can't articulate it good enough, but we believe in that. And that's the difference why we're working in the space where other programmers are not entering the space yet. I think one affordance that I want to quickly shed light on, and I think it's a hypothesis basically, is that worlds on the blockchain is autonomous. And precisely because of that, when you interact with these worlds, these contexts and systems on chain, you know that there's not some privileged group of people on Earth that can change stuff in that world. Like you look at the Constitution or you look at the physics, you know it won't change. I mean, physics of this world is not visible, right? There's not like a scroll that's inscribing all the physics in some kind of human notation we can go back to. And so we believe in God, or maybe you're against creationism, then you have to discover that maybe through scientific method. But on-chain game is different. You have a world that is autonomous because blockchain is credible neutral. And precisely because of this, you can invest 30 years of your time and ask your kids and your grandkids to build on top of that. Because you know some game companies' profitability is not tied to the success of this world. So I think this is one very key affordance. And so stuff we build have to center around that. Another thing that I want to mention is composability. So composability is something that we throw around a lot. I don't see that really proven yet among games, right? There are multiple levels, as in, can I compose games? I play in one game and next moment I jump to another game. That's like game composability. You can have game object composability and so on. I would say we don't see that yet. And even if we see that, I mean, Web2 games, traditional games have tremendous composability. How are we gonna beat them? So I think one thing is, because building an autonomous world is something that will last basically forever, you're willing to contribute to stuff that compose a lot better with other people. Because you're sort of contributing to infrastructure of that world. You're building a country, you're building pipelines that may materialize into value for generations down the road and so on. I think this is something that traditional games don't have.
And I think that the idea of the autonomous worlds applies both to the developers and the players of the games, right? Like we were just talking inside about, think about like all the games that you played as a kid, like all the time that I sunk into World of Warcraft, and like my character isn't around anymore because I'm not paying $15 a month for it to be around. Or like Destiny 1, like I loved the hunter that I played in Destiny 1, and like if I fire up Destiny 1 and go to the tower, there's nobody there for me to like flex my Wrath of the Machine armor on anymore. So like players also know on the other side of the fence that these games will be around forever, and the time that they're investing into them are not going to just be like thrown to the wayside.
And there was like the entire Vitalik story about like what got him into thinking about like decentralized like governance about stuff is like I think his World of Warcraft account got erased and he got pissed about it, like never again.
He lost his sword.
Also
he was angry, and then we had Ethereum get born.
And
Sorry, I think that's enough. Oh, it's okay.
so on the topic of autonomous worlds, actually, I don't know if you've read it, but there's a great blog post by Ludens from the 0xBlock and Lattice team, which actually is extremely similar to like some of the blog posts that Guilty Geezer has been putting out for the past year or so, which is the thought that we throw around the world like skeuomorphic a lot, which means that you're using the affordances of a previous paradigm onto the new one. Like film in the beginnings used to look like theater plays because that's what we used to know. And then we understood like the grammar, the affordances of cinema is like the camera. So we started to do like shots, different kind of things. And I think we have the same thinking with games. We think about them as games. It's like, okay, how can I run Call of Duty on the blockchain? How can I do this or that? And the blog post is actually very close to what you also were thinking. is close to the notion that Josh Stark from the Ethereum Foundation mentions as hardness. He says we have hardness in like the physical world. Like I know if I drop this mic, it's going to fall off. That's hardness. We have hardness in terms of rule of law, like constitution. And now we have a way to build hardness computationally. You know that something there is going to exist. That's what an NFT says to you. It says something exists there, and it's going to stay there, and you have a guarantee. So the way we're thinking about it with like the Brick team is to think about NFTs are objects. They're not the representation of something else. They're not a tokenized version of something. You're creating something. And in linguistics, there's this term about like performative utterance. It's like I hereby declare you married and wife. It's a bit the same thing. It's like loot exactly work this way. It's I now declare 8,000 loot bags, and it was like yeah, they exist. No one's questioning their validity, but the fact that they're on chain, they exist as a hard piece of like a digital data. You have a change of quality. It just becomes something that exists actually. So I completely agree with you about the fact that you get we need to think about affordances in terms of hardness.
Yeah, I think so. Terrence, one of our other co-founders, gave a presentation during Crypto NYC. Thank you, where he talked about generational games, and he talked about this model kind of for that hardness. That was kind of this four-tiered model that starts with primitives at the bottom. So you're thinking about NFTs, and in the case of games, you might think of like a sword or a piece of armor, whatever it is. The second tier is attributes. So those NFTs might have specific attributes, like a sword has damage, armor has an armor rating. The third layer is behaviors. And so now you're creating worlds and games and situations where the interactions between those items and the players that own them are governed, or shouldn't use the word governed, are dictated by a behavior that is hard, right? This is not, it's ambiguous. And then the fourth tier is governance. And governance refers to kind of DAOs and how the community makes decisions about, how those three tiers change over time. So when you think about those four layers together, primitives, attributes, behaviors, and governance, the whole thing, to use the term from this blog post, becomes a hard system that players and developers can both kind of, rely on. They know that there's a real infrastructure there for them to build things of substance on.
Yeah, and then we get back to this notion of credible neutrality that is like central to blockchain. Like, why would I build on this blockchain versus this other one? Because you do know that the rules are not going to change overnight. You know that there is not like this one dictator that's going to wipe everything and put something else in place. And that's why it's so central to building stuff. It's like you need to know that this hardness is safe kept. And another shout out to the Lattice team. If you haven't read it, Homo Ludens from Joseph Huizinga is like an absolute great great book about like how games work. And the way this philosopher approaches it is to say, okay, a game is like a circle you put in the ground and you have rules in it. And it's very natural. You do know that when you step out of the circle, the rules don't apply. But the moment you're in the circle, the rules do apply. And it very much dictates, I feel, how they approach games, because the MUD engine that they're building, the ECS system, is actually built on that thing. Is that you do understand that in this world, this NFT is going to be like a sword, but then in this other world, it's going to have a different set of attributes. It's still the same item, you do know it, and kids know it. That's the crazy thing. Like, when a kid picks up a stick, they're like, okay, now it's a sword. And everyone's like, yeah, it's a sword. It just so turns out that in Web3, we're like, well, this is not a great sword because it's not like 4K, absolute digital rendering, deluxe, and something. But it was never the question. The question is, this thing exists, and we all collectively agree that it's a sword. So I always find it quite strange that people are very much hell-bent on like fidelity, on it needs to be like super hardcore, well-rendered. Well, loot is like a bunch of words, and it works. Like everyone was like, yeah, it does exist. It's a bit like in the Matrix, like there's no spoon, well, there's no JPEG.
Yeah, I love that one because something that we talk about at Cartridge a lot is Web3 is a way to enable like this return to like the innocence of playing games as a kid. And I love that thing of like, this stick is a sword now. If we all agree that it's a sword, then it's a sword. And we don't need like Blizzard or Activision or whoever to tell us that it's a sword. We can make that decision and it becomes our reality, right?
I'm just thinking about loot. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. It's really up to our interpretation of these hard assets, and that I think loot was the unlock in showing everyone that, right? Like, what is a Warhammer? You know, it can be anybody's interpretation, but that single loot bag will last for the length of the chain. So hardness.
And I think when you look at like NFT projects, you definitely have like specters of rendering. If you know the dichotomy between like the shape rotators and the word cells, so the shape rotators are like the people that are very good with math and can like rotate stuff in their heads, and the word cells are more like better like theory. I think we have sort of the same dichotomy, but for NFTs. On the one hand, we have word cells like loot. It's like there's a bag, like it exists. And then on the other hand, you have the shape rotators. It's more like, okay, we need to render it like really hard. We need to actually have the canonical representation working. And that's where you get like, okay, call the view function is going to create a full GLB file, then it will send to your browser. And I think it's Simon de la Rouvière, who's like a great guy talking about NFTs, who coined the term, or maybe it was Dom, I don't remember, who said you just need minimum viable fidelity. And I think a lot of NFT projects, like art projects, try to be like super hardcore about the rendering part, about the shape rotating. But like, yeah, this is what it is. But I don't think that's what blockchain is about. I think what blockchain is about it's more word cell. It's more, you need like a modicum of interpretation. Like you need the string for loots, but that's just about what you need. Maybe the rest of it just doesn't have to be on chain.
I think I'm going to get like a little abstract and philosophical on you, but I have a friend, really smart dude. His name is Keyshawn, and I've been talking to him a lot about kind of like branding, and that's kind of a world that he's really interested in. And he's kind of building this framework for brand building, and one of the concepts that he talks about a lot is negative space. And he loves to talk about this concept in Japanese artwork called ma that refers to negative space. The idea being that the viewer of, let's say, a painting in this case, sees kind of the central subject of the painting, and the negative space is really important because the viewer fills that in with their own experience and interpretation. And I think it's actually really cool when you think about loot and you read like wool helmet. In that kind of low fidelity world, like it leaves it up to the user or the player to interpret that and kind of like project their own experience onto that. And I think what's really cool, real quick, is that it's not just the player, but it's also in the world of blockchain gaming, also the developers. Like an independent team can look at the Loot project and say, okay, we're going to create our own way to interpret this wool helmet. We're going to build our own game, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why everyone was sniped by it, because it was a homage back to your childhood. Pick up the stick. This is my sword, and there was hundreds of people just Well, when you read it back, it's like it's your own mental projection of it. I'm still here building on it.
Might have some vested interests.
Slightly.
But actually, I think that's something that you folks at Realms have built, right? You've got like the adventurer with the metadata on chain, and then using Stable Diffusion to actually create an image, an interpretation of this.
Yeah, now that's like a trained model on all of our experiences, creating its interpretation through our input. I'm really excited. I mean, every week there's some breakthrough right now in ML. In it.
I'm really stoked for adventurers. Like RPGs are kind of my bread and butter, like Zelda, the Dark Alliance Baldur's Gate series. Those are the games that like really speak to me. So I'm stoked to see what you guys are going to do with that. It's going to be cool.
It's I'm stoked too. We hopefully in a couple months we should have something. But we are I think everybody knows. But we actually are going to use Stable Diffusion, and so you'll be able to, create your own interpretation of your character and then take it through its journeys, and then it might become infamous, and then maybe in 6 months' time we can upscale that into a 3D model of the character that you've created.
What we're one of the features that we're really excited about at Cartridge is building, and this isn't novel in the space, but a quest and achievement system to accompany this kind of central place where you can, well, not central place, but the Cartridge platform where you can kind of onboard and quickly play games. So we've been talking to the Realms team about what quests and achievements we want to build, and when the Adventurers kind of announcement came out, they were like, okay, we're going to do 3 quests and an achievement, not to give too much away here, but the quest would be like, mint your Adventurer, equip weapons and armor, and then complete like a dungeon.
Go on a dungeon, cool, yeah.
And then the achievement that you would get was called the Hero's Journey, and I was like, oh dude, I'm fucking sold. That's amazing. I'm really excited. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. The dungeon is one of our upcoming games, and we actually, I don't know if anyone was looking at or went to Inai's talk about graphs, but we've created a generative dungeon crawler using the graph model. So you hop through nodes, and every time you load a dungeon, it creates a dungeon in on-chain state, and then it renders it in the browser. And so every time you open one of these dungeons, it's different every time. So infinite content, infinite amount of dungeons you can crawl.
Shout out to Annie from the Nethermind team, wherever you are.
They keep calling him a junior developer. He's a Cairo god at this point, in my mind.
And to come back to the definition of hardness that you gave, or the idea that we have to work on affordances, that reminds me of something else about places. There's a book by French anthropologist Marc Auger called Non-Places. It says you have places and non-places. Places are areas, spatial areas where history happens. Non-places are places that you go through, like a mall, an airport, a corridor. He says the more the world develops, the more you get non-places, the more you're just passing through something. And that's why he says okay, you know if a city exists or not, if you can just stop somewhere, or if you're just always in transit. And I feel that we're getting back this sense of space, this sense of actually having a place somewhere on the blockchain. And weirdly enough, it's a bit it's like the wallet. Wallet's a place. It's like when you put an NFT there, it's not moving anywhere. It's not going out. Again, the analogy that Lancelot from Brick uses is well, if I have something in my wallet, it's like putting an artwork in my living room. So it's not moving. So you get this sort of sense of space rather than having a non-place. You have borrowed space when you're somewhere else that does not have the same guarantee, the same hardness. So you're not able to invest as much. You're just renting it.
Your block space.
You heard it here first.
There's a game called Friendsland that's being built on the Cartridge platform.
Shout out to Iris and the rest of the team.
And we were talking about it earlier. Friendsland is it's an on-chain world building game where you harvest resources and you kind of build your own community. And you talked a little bit about the idea of composability and how, we kind of dance around it, but I don't think anybody's really nailed it yet. And I imagine a potential future state for Friendsland where you can kind of incorporate assets from other games into it. So on the website, I know it talks about having your Dope Wars, Thieves' Den in your Friendsland world. And I think that's a potential for a place, right? Somewhere that feels like a home, somewhere where you have actually moved into the space and you look around and the things that are there are your own. So I think it's starting, right? But yeah.
I think I couldn't help but go to a meta level and looking at all this. I want to just comment on the place versus non-place thing, right? And then we have this, a stick is not a stick, but it's a sword thing. And then we have the text projected to a higher dimension, via stable diffusion stuff. I think from an outsider point of view, looking at us, you might be thinking, oh, these guys just trying to grab onto something and trying to define what they're doing, otherwise they're losing their sanity. Which might be true. But I think on the other hand, if you believe in the potential of this medium, I think the people that are honest in this space really is experimenting with, finding new affordances, finding new ways to materialize them into concrete, engaging experiences. And so if it feels crazy that whatever we're talking is, I think it's actually a bit crazy, but we need to experiment a lot more. And I also want to comment on the high fidelity, like 4K 60 FPS stuff, non-compatible to the blockchain games. I think it's difficult because teams need to feed themselves to work on things. And so if you talk to investors that feel excited about 4K 60 FPS coming to the blockchain, you might change your mind and think, well, this is the future of blockchain game. It's where AAA game studios bring their expertise and start building things with market mechanisms neutral on the blockchain where things don't have a ceiling, they can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you might think that is the future of blockchain games. And on the investor side, they might not really know what is a blockchain game. I would say they basically don't know because we don't know. But because of some incentive structure, they know they can exit the deal, but I think the thing is, if they talk about funding, like supporting on-chain game team, but they talk about token deals and lockout periods, they're not being honest. So yeah, I think this is a multi-dimensional thing, but I think honesty and experimentation is key.
Yeah, I think I like to think of like on-chain games as like the early type of consoles. You had this hard constraint of that little bit of hardware. And the team has really pushed it to its limit, pushed the hardware to its limit, and came up with all these new innovative ways of shifting frames and to actually create some of these famous games that we all love. And I think we're at that time right now where we're all just fooling around with this with this new medium, and it's not going to be your 4K 60 FPS game that's going to crack it. It is going to be. If you look at a lot of this like cult games, they're not the 60 FPS. Those games come and go. A lot of them are just lemons that you play once and you're like, this looks cool, but it sucks. Like, has anyone played Vampire Survivors?
Which game?
No, it's a new game. Like, it came about like 6 months ago. It's a little like your little character, and you can only move. That's it. That's your only, like, you move and pick up stuff, and it fires for you. It's like a bullet hell type game. But anyway, it's like $4 on Steam. But it's amazing, and it's so simple because they've just removed every option from you except for moving, and you just pick up weapons, and it just gets crazier and crazier. But it's those little games that really stick and you keep coming back to, and they last for like years. You'll come back to that in 10 years. You're probably not going to play the Call of Duty. Well, don't play Call of Duty, but you know what I mean. And I think that's where we're going to head to. And someone's going to crack this, simple cult game, utilizing the medium that it is. Using block times or timestamps, and just this like player state change.
I want to comment on the crappy feature of the game. To the analogy of theater versus moving pictures, right? I feel like when we talk about 4K 60 FPS on the blockchain, we're basically saying we're using a camera, or we're fixing it, and we're inviting the famous Shakespeare company to give us a drama, right? That's not really using what camera really affords, but the early pioneers also didn't know what cameras brought. So we're basically playing with this camera and fiddling around and yes, fucking around, find out. But I think it's really important for us to do this, right? Because on the contrary, you'll be basically inviting all the famous theater companies and fix your camera there. Yeah. That's not going anywhere.
And we're all reading Goz's articles every month and questioning our existence and what we're doing.
Yeah, and as the saying goes, if you never fuck around, like you never find out.
Never find out.
Yeah, we should get the graph over there. Like, we have the fuck around and find out graph.
Guilty's in the top right.
Yeah, you're fucking around and finding out.
I think it's fortunate that Topology. The reason why Topology is able to do this partly is because we have supporters with super long time horizon. Without the normal maturity of their funds, so we're able to do this, and so we feel very fortunate. But we just want to advocate that this is important.
Yeah, I feel that on the Brick side, we're a little bit like on the sidelines on these things because we're not a game company. We're like a company. We build assets that can be reused in games. So I do think we're one of the very few projects out there that is actually like natively composable, and that composability is our raison d'être. It's the only reason we're going to succeed. CryptoKitties, they work for CryptoKitties, and all promises of anyone can build a game has just never materialized. So we just done the other way. So thinking about all these things, I really, really do hope you're all going to work because I actually need you folks to consume any assets that we will actually provide on the Brick side.
The composability is coming. We're all going to build shared interfaces, and we will interface together. ACAR, Goza, cartridge. We're basically already composed at this point.
Have you folks? How many time do we still have, Sam? All right, 2-ish. All right, to finish up, have you folks read Masters of Doom? You read it, right? Haven't. It's a great book about the history of ID Software. So these folks were the guys who built Doom and Quake. And I do feel like reading that book, I was feeling like, oh, I know these folks, like they're my friends. It's you folks. They were like very crafty people who actually tried the new affordances, like how can you build this stuff? They had it's the entire story of like how you come around in building Doom and building Quake, and they were extremely crafty, extremely smart. They had no money. They had like to steal the computers that we were using during the day, carry them around like 12 miles to another house, actually hack the whole night, and then bring them back to the place. And that's why they said that like you make it happen and it still works, and you do not need $200 million of VC money. You just need to fuck around and find out.
I think this is key, right? Because we're in a bear market. I think it's in a bear market, you may have ideas about fucking around, but then if one thing catches investor attention and you know you can cash out, I think it's just human nature to want to consider that. But then in the bear market, I think we can do a lot more here. Yeah.
Closing statements, folks? Thomas?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't have much to say, actually. I did not participate a lot, but I feel like I did a hackathon, honestly. I want to sleep. I'm sorry.
No worries, this man deserves peace.
It's been a long 48 hours.
Yeah.
I think I just said about composability before, but we've got Goza, dropping these innovative articles every month, which we're all reading and absorbing and iterating, and then we've got the cartridge team massively innovating on the whole UX side of things. We've got the ACAR building the state channels in 48 hours, and the Starknet ID. And so all these little bits are coming together to build these this next generation of games. So I think when we have this chat in 12 months, there's going to be a whole ecosystem of games, and maybe someone's cracked that perfect game for this medium. I bet they will.
I'll just say I think that we at the Cartridge team just feel really fortunate to be kind of somehow at the center of this community of smart and passionate teams who are building cool shit, and it's really excited to see things evolve, and we're excited to support you guys and do everything we can to facilitate the ecosystem taking off. So yeah, it's been really cool.
I just want to quickly comment on what game programmers in the actual game industry, not this sort of make-believe game industry, feels about blockchain games. Like, they look at a blockchain game that basically works on a subset of a subset of a subset of whatever they works on, but then because of the proximity to money in the Web3 space, people can monetize a subset of a game, whereas in the game industry they have to package and labor thousands of hours to push something to the market. And I think that sort of perverse incentive screw a lot of things up. But then we're in a bear market, so everything is great.
And remember, folks, if you never fuck around, you'll never find out. So thank you for the panel. We had Gilta Gyoza from Topology, Gabe from Cartridge, Thomas from Acore and Stock and ID, and Lo from Realms, and it was your moderator, Sil from Brick. Thank you very much.
Thank you.